Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's virtual annual meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning or MAP Forum. NIMTIC is pleased to host this year's virtual annual meeting. My name is Adam Levine and I'm the Executive Director here at NIMTIC, the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. Today's meeting will feature two presentations on regional issues and one on a regional event, the 2026 FIFA World Cup. That is a bit of a change of pace for the MAP Forum and we are happy to explore its implications. We'll also hear about an important regional study, the Reimagine the Bronx study, which has implications across the multi-state region, as well as important regional initiatives on energy demand and freight systems, which also impacts the broader region. But before we get into that, we have some organizational housekeeping to address. We will start the meeting with a roll call of MAP Forum members for today's meeting. I would ask the primary representative of each member to state their name when I call out each member. Connecticut Metropolitan Council of Governments.
This is Megan Sloan. I'm the Planning Director at MetroCog.
Thank you, Megan. Capital Region Council of Governments.
Kara Radsons, Deputy Director of Transportation Planning.
Thank you, Kara. Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. Not sure. Did we have someone speak up for Lehigh Valley? Maybe they can join us later. Okay. How about Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments? Maybe they can join us later too, unless they're having some issues with the mute button. Let's go to Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments.
Good afternoon. This is Rich Donovan, the Transportation Planning Director.
Thank you, Rich. New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, that's us. And that's me, Adam Levine, Executive Director. North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority.
Hi, David Barron, Executive Director at NJTPA.
Thank you, Dave. Orange County Transportation Council. Hopefully Orange County will join us later as well. South Central Regional Council of Governments.
Hello, I'm Laura Francis. I am the Executive Director, and I'm joined by Jim Rode, our Director of Transportation Planning, and Kelly Kingston, our new Transportation Planner.
Thank you, Laura, and everyone at South Central Regional. Great to have you with us. Western Connecticut Council of Governments.
Hi, Francis Pickering from WestCog.
Thank you, Francis. All right. I didn't want to forget to mention that we've got quite a few folks on the call from the NIMTIC team. It might be too numerous to mention, but I'll mention a couple. Jerry Bogaz, Minash Patel. Let me see if I can pick off a few other folks who might be on the team. Rosanna Weidekamp, Stephanie Brooks. I don't see Fidel Garcia. So thank you also for helping to get this meeting moving. And with that in mind, let's keep it moving. So thank you all. We will now move into our main presentations for today's meeting, starting with the regional issues. After these presentations, we will be entertaining questions from the MAP Forum members and time permitting from the audience. MAP Forum members can raise their electronic hands and be recognized. Audience members can submit questions via the webinar chat pod, which is being monitored. So first up, our first presentation is going to be on the Reimagine the Bronx study, and that's going to be given by Rochelle Brahalla, New York City Department of Transportation. Rochelle?
Hey there, thank you very much. I will briefly share my screen, unless the presentation is queued up on your end.
Not seeing it.
No, go for it, Rochelle.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so just confirming that we can see these slides and I'll move forward.
You're good.
Thank you so much, appreciate it. It's really my pleasure to join you all today. Thank you so much for the invitation. We would love to update this group on content related to the draft vision, which we released that is associated with the Reimagine the Bronx study. So this is a presentation that we've been giving externally. Oh, excuse me. Is my audio working?
It is working. I can hear you.
Okay.
So I did see someone put something in the chat about having audio issues. They might need to adjust their settings.
Okay.
If
Good
anyone
luck.
else is having that issue, though, let us know. But it seems like we can all hear Rochelle. Most of us can hear Rochelle. Sorry, Rochelle.
No. I'm glad it is a singular issue, hopefully. Right, so today we'll give you a preview. Oh, and I should mention that this is a presentation that we've been giving externally since our engagement, which ended, our agency-led engagement ended October 28th. We are in a current period of community partner engagement, which is smaller engagement events led by our community partners, which ends later next week. So this is a public presentation that's available on our website, and I can point you all to that if needed. So today we'll give a preview of the short, medium, and long-term concepts that make up this preliminary draft vision for the Cross Bronx Expressway. I just want to note that this will be a fair amount of information. This is summarizing a 2-hour engagement effort. So if you would like to see additional details, I encourage you to visit the Cross Bronx website, the Reimagine the Cross Bronx website, where you can read in more detail the details of the draft vision. So today we'll start by reviewing the study timeline and background, some of which will be, I'm sure, very familiar to those of you who have been engaging on this corridor or engaging in this study. So first of all, what is Reimagine the Cross Bronx study? This is a study that was funded by the U.S. Department of Transportation with a $2 million grant as a part of the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Program, or RAISE for short. When Robert Moses constructed the Cross Bronx decades ago, the highway divided the borough, and today neighborhoods surrounding the expressway are disconnected and experience some of the worst health issues in the city. This study aims to facilitate a community-driven process that culminates in a vision of short, medium, and long-term concepts that improve quality of life in the study area. Along the way, the study team intends to support community leadership around the issue and foster long-term relationships between government agencies, elected officials, and Bronx stakeholders. So we started this study in the spring of 2023, and since then we've heard from thousands of community members about the issues that Bronx residents face every single day in and around the expressway. I want to take this moment to recognize our community partners who I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. They have really supported this study and greatly expanded the scope of our agency-led outreach to really meet people where they're at and gather information directly from community members to support this visioning study. So today we're updating you after finishing our third and final round of agency-led outreach before we release a final vision plan later this year. And community partners will continue their outreach in the week ahead perhaps. So in this final concept refinement phase, we aim to address issues that came to light through the engagement process in previous rounds. Many of these are transportation related, like connectivity, mobility, and traffic safety, but some are also related to health and building stronger relationships between communities and government agencies through this and future processes. One way we're responding to community input is by demonstrating that we can make a difference along the expressway this year, 5 years from now, 10 years down the line, decades down the line. These short and midterm projects can be advanced as soon as next year, and they include street improvement projects, community health and asthma programs, and planning studies. So meanwhile, while these long-term projects like highway capping will require a lot more time, money, and coordination to construct, so while the hard work is being done behind the scenes to advance these big infrastructure changes, please know that we want to let community know that we are moving these shorter term proposals forward in the meantime. The draft, and then if folks are not familiar with kind of the New York City DOT toolkit, you'll see that we have intersection treatments such as these, which include neck downs, daylighting, bike corrals. And there's of course more details on our website in the draft vision about what we kind of imagine as a short-term project within our short-term toolkit. The draft vision describes existing policies and programs that can be expanded, strengthened, and promoted to address community identified issues. And these are kind of programs that would complement street infrastructure projects and complement long-term infrastructure projects. These are freight management programs, air quality education, clean streets partnerships, housing safety policy, flood management strategies, and asthma resources. And before fully diving into the capping proposal, we have for you today, I want to share two other big ideas that frame the draft vision, and these focus on making it easier to travel east to west without a car. And first is transit. A disconnected street grid makes it difficult to travel east to west if you're walking, biking, or riding transit. And since all subway lines are oriented north-south in the borough, the only option for getting east-west on transit is via bus. And if you ride the bus, you know that bus riders in the Bronx experience crowded buses and slow speeds consistently throughout the borough. There is a proposal along Tremont Avenue that I want to highlight that was presented to community boards last month in November. This proposal aims to respond, really connects to the needs of the study to promote faster, more reliable bus service and improved east to west travel. So this proposal presented a busway along Tremont Avenue in the Tremont neighborhood. So I encourage you to check out that proposal as well on our website. The second piece is improving the bike network. So City DOT has a vision to connect the Harlem River Greenway to the Bronx River Greenway to the Hutchinson River Greenway, which could include new connections on highway caps as well as new bike lanes on east to west streets. One concept I want to highlight here are short and midterm solutions to make an easier cycling connection to the Harlem River Greenway via the Tremont Avenue step streets. And so here you can see how a bike rail can be easily attached to a step street in the short run to make it easier for folks to walk their bikes up the step streets. And then in the long run, we can think about how a cycling connection can pair with a step street in a specific location. And then finally, in the kind of more in the midterm, we're looking at strategies to separate local and through traffic on the highway to make the expressway a more reliable connector for longer trips. Throughout engagement, we heard how sections of the Cross Bronx Expressway are like a parking lot sometimes, and it's really impossible. It's hard sometimes for the expressway to actually act as the regional connector that it was intended to be. So we're looking into strategies to keep local traffic on local streets moving and to keep highway traffic on highways moving more efficiently. So now that you've heard some of that framing, we can dive into the highway capping proposals. First things first, to define capping, a highway cap has a few names. Some people call it a deck or a stitch or a highway lid. And today you'll hear me use the term capping to refer to this piece of infrastructure. And essentially a highway cap sits on top of a highway that runs underground or runs beneath the surface of the rest of the area, and adds new space on top of the highway that can be used for recreation or reconnecting from one side of the highway to the other. And where can a highway cap go? So it's important as we're discussing this to remember that a highway cap is a major piece of engineering, a major feat of engineering and construction. And unfortunately, a highway cap can't go everywhere along the Cross Bronx. And so, for example, if there's a large height difference on either side of the highway, or if the highway isn't wide enough to support a foundation, or if the highway isn't deep enough to build a cover that still allows bus and truck traffic through, it may not be possible to build a cap. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind kind of as we go through the details of this capping proposal and as you look into the draft vision for further details. Highway capping has many benefits, including reduced noise pollution and new open spaces, but highway capping, does not fully eliminate air pollution. This is something that came up in engagement a lot that we continue to want to clarify. Highway capping can do a lot, but it can't actually solve air pollution itself. A highway cap can lower air pollutant concentrations at a specific location, like localized air quality improvements, but it can't get rid of emissions, and that requires other programmatic and policy efforts like moving to cleaner fuels, electrifying vehicles, and shifting trips to public transit. Active ventilation is needed for highway caps that are longer than 300 feet, and this is about the length of the city block. For highway caps that are that long, they technically constitute a tunnel underneath, and so there needs to be active ventilation to move the air from under the tunnel up to the surface. And there's a need to follow, of course, city, state, and federal guidelines regarding air quality, ventilation, and fire life safety. In the draft vision, we've identified 13 locations where a cap can be built based on the current physical conditions. Here, they're listed from west to east, and in the next slide, you can see where these potential locations are located on the map. Again, I encourage you to look at this in more detail, but on the map here, you can see where is possible to cap is indicated in green. You'll see partial caps, full caps, continuous caps. Let's see. Right, so I think it will be really interesting if you're familiar with this area, if you want to take a closer look to understand, where capping is possible, and then the draft vision kind of provides additional details about what all of this can look like. This study focuses primarily on physical feasibility, but future studies will consider even more metrics to prioritize future investments. So during engagement, we asked folks to share how a highway cap can best serve them and their communities, whether it's by restoring connections across the highway, having easier access to community centers, or providing new spaces for recreation. We got great guidance from those discussions. We heard loud and clear that connections and open space continue to be sort of the top issues from community members to understand, to prioritizing investments and being able to provide equitable infrastructural improvements for residents of the Bronx. So now digging into a few highway cap examples, we'll start here at Jerome Avenue. Here, a partial highway cap could provide new spaces while restoring pedestrian connections north and south at Inwood Avenue and Townsend Avenue here. So restoring these pedestrian connections, improving connectivity there. This would expand green spaces adjacent to Inwood Park, the Feather Benches, and Jenny Jerome Playground. And there's also enough room on the cap to provide a new street that could connect all the way from University Avenue to Jerome. There are more details about this connection in the online report, but to give a high-level summary, this new street could help make a direct connection from the AC and 1 trains in Manhattan to the 4 and BD trains in this area of the Bronx. Here at Walter Gladwin and Crotona Parks, a new cap could connect these two really great neighborhood assets and amenities that have been fully disconnected by the expressway. You can see how the expressway fully separates these two parks. And so a vision to provide a highway cap here that mitigates, that rejoins these two parks could be really interesting and is something that has been highlighted as a priority in the community. At Hugh Grant Circle in the east, a combination of short and medium-term projects and street closures could expand Virginia Playground and create safer, shorter crossings for folks accessing the 6 train Parkchester station here within the circle. And in the long term, 2 pretty big highway caps could expand Virginia Park while improving noise pollution and making it much more pleasant for folks who are walking and biking and rolling around the circle. And last but not least, because a highway cap is not able to be built everywhere along the expressway, this draft vision explores other ways to invest in new infrastructure that makes connections easier. So for example, this concept for a new, wider pedestrian bridge at Olmsted Avenue could make walking and biking more pleasant over the expressway. At the end of the draft vision, the team has outlined next steps for the study. First of all, we do expect the final report to be released later this year. And second, we want to share again that all the agencies that have been involved in this work, so including State DOT, City DCP, Department of City Planning, and City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, all of these agencies and more are committed to advancing this work in the coming years and working together in the short and medium term. For longer projects like capping, we want to emphasize that these major infrastructure projects will require large amounts of city, state, and federal funding. So next steps from here include developing these capping concepts further through formal design, engineering, and planning processes. And at the same time, we'll be pursuing funding sources like federal infrastructure grants to move this work forward. It will be a long road ahead, but if you're interested, I really encourage you to stay tuned. This is a really big first step for the movement around improving equitable infrastructure in the Bronx and reconnecting communities across the highway. So we are looking forward to working with partner agencies and community members to really move this forward and help this really come to life. Thank you so much.
That was great. Thank you, Rochelle. We're going to hold questions on your presentation until after we get our next presentation. But before we jump into that, I did want to offer, I know that we've had additional folks join us. I think we have a representative from Orange County, OCTC. If you just wanted to say hi, we weren't able to get you in on the roll call. Stacy, is that you? We're not hearing you too well, but Stacy Butler from OCTC, I think, is trying to say hi.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, now I heard you. Great. Thank you, Stacy. And I also just, of course, when I started to name folks from NIMTech, I risked forgetting a couple people, which I did. And so John Simpson and Caroline Ibarra are also with NIMTech on the NIMTech team. And I hope I didn't miss anybody else. But enough of that. Let's move to our next topic, which is going to be energy demand and freight systems. And we're very happy to have Stephan Pezdek, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, here to tell us about that. Stephan?
Thanks, Adam. It's actually Stephan.
Sorry about that, Stephan.
That's okay. All right, let me just cue this up and I'll get going. And can everybody see my screen?
Good, Stephan.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. First off, thank you for having me. My name is Stephan Pezdek. I'm the Regional Freight Planning Manager for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Just a little quick background on me. I've been here with the agency for a number of years. I have a background both in designing transportation facilities as an architect in the agency, but also more recently, before coming into this role, I was with our port department for several years, including running one of our marine terminals for 4.5 years. So I'm coming to you in terms of discussion about what the overall freight network is kind of evolving into. But before I kind of get into that, I want to share with you what the Port Authority is. And for those who are not as familiar with the Port Authority, we oversee both trade and movement between New York and New Jersey. We have a number of different types of facilities throughout the region. Aviation facilities, tunnels and bridges, the PATH system, as well as the port operations and the World Trade Center. And to zoom in a little bit more on the port system, we oversee the 5 main port terminals here in the New York, New Jersey region. Most of those are container ports, but we also have, we are the second largest container port in the nation. And we also accommodate auto movements, cruise, bulk, and dry and liquid bulk movements, as well as a number of other different commodities that move through our port. So just to give you a sense about what kind of role we play and what we move and how these things move through our system. So last year, as I mentioned before, this year we're on track to be the second largest container port in the nation by volume. We take up a fair amount of the U.S. East Coast trade. We're the #1 port on the U.S. East Coast. And in terms of the actual number of TEUs, which is 20-foot equivalent units, which is half of a standard 40-foot container. Last year, we moved about 7,800,000 TEUs, which is down from what we had moved back in 2022, which was over 9 million, 9.5 million. But this year, with all of the challenges with freight and movement, we're still looking to be in second place, though we still haven't had our numbers come in yet. So we can't tell you what our total volume is for this year so far. But to give you a sense, if you were driving a truck with a full container from our port, right now we can reach within 4 hours 46 million people within our region. If you extrapolate that out to an 8-hour run, which is a good fair chunk of with traffic and other issues, we are able to expand well into Canada, well into the Midwest. And this is really the overall reach in which we operate. So we are a large on-demand, in terms of on-demand port. We service many of the different major metropolitan areas throughout the Northeast. And also about 90% of what comes into our port stays in this immediate region. So most of what comes in here is serving our local communities. We also move a fair amount, about 10 to 15% of our freight by rail movement. So we have 4 on-dock rail facilities, and we move all of these goods out into the Midwest. And this is one of our biggest competitive areas in which we are trying to compete with the ports on the West Coast. So to kind of get into the meat of the discussion that we're all here for, to talk about freight and energy and what that looks like, let me kick off by explaining why this is important to the Port Authority. As I mentioned before, we oversee all of the terminals, but we are not necessarily, it is not Port Authority employees moving containers or anything else like that. We have tenants who operate our facility, but we are looking at trying to hit the goal of a net zero for all of our facilities, for all of our operations, for scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by 2050. And when you actually look at the amount of emissions that are within our scope 1 and scope 2 of reach, it's only 4% of our overall direct emissions. The vast majority of what we have that we have to try to rein in and bring down to net zero is vast. And one of those areas in particular that has a large footprint is our freight network. And at the same time as we're trying to condense down and reduce our emissions, the freight network is actually asking for more and more energy. So right now, we're seeing that as we are growing and evolving in our freight network, we're seeing demands in larger amount of electricity demand for everything from autonomous systems, drone systems, AI computing integration, robotics and robotics manufacturing and sorting and organizing. We often talk about zero emission vehicles, and a lot of those are made up of EV, both personal and trucking equipment. But there's also a lot of ground handling equipment and cargo handling equipment that that stays on port or at the airport. We also are talking about larger windows of operation in terms of 24-hour operations. Some of the facilities, not necessarily at our ports, but throughout our network, are operating in longer windows. And we're also talking about all the building energy systems and the growing need for all that. In addition to this, and I'll get a little bit into this a little bit further down in this presentation, we're seeing that a lot of our future fuels that will help offset these emissions also require a fair amount of energy in order to produce them. So we're looking at an overall larger demand capacity need for our freight network than we're seeing right now. And just to give you a sense about where most of these, where these different fuel types and different transportation modes, where they have the biggest sort of impact on our overall emissions in terms of the whole scope of all the national emissions, you can see that a fair amount of freight movement actually sits within this larger 33% of our transportation emissions. And the most interesting thing about this is that a lot of the things that we see on a regular basis, things like longer haul trucks, short haul deliveries, these have a bigger emissions footprint than some of our more traditional sort of freight movements by rail, by maritime. So in a lot of ways, we're seeing a lot of re-envisioning or re-looking at some of our older modes of transportation because they can create more opportunities to reduce our emission scope more effectively than if we are just focusing solely on electrification or any of these other movements to new fuel systems. And talking about fuel is such a large portion of all of these different operating modes, actual over total operating costs. So if you look at trucking, somewhere between 24 and 40% of the overall truck operation is reliant on fuel. That goes way up even more so when you're talking about maritime shipping, and same goes for aircraft operations. So how can we kind of shift some of these conversations around to kind of reduce that? So some of the ways in which we're looking at how to consolidate some of this is by leveraging more rail, leveraging things like intermodal barge, which is not as frequently used here in the US, but is much more predominant in Europe. One good example of bulk material barges is that at JFK Airport, we are undergoing a $19 billion renovation of our airport facilities, and a large amount of bulk materials are being brought in and out of our facility by barge. And that means that we're now removing up to 300,000 trucks off the road that would normally be moving material in and out. Trailer on barge and trailer on rail is also another way in which you see some movement throughout the country or in other locations that doesn't necessarily get used here quite as frequently, but it shows a lot of potential to be able to help bridge the network and also decongest some of the roadway networks. Just to kind of zoom in a little bit more so on the maritime shipping side, what you can see is this is the total number of vessels that we had called just at our port facilities. Now, this isn't including all of the other maritime facilities that we have that are not part of the Port Authority's facilities. But you can see there's a large number of ships, and these ships are not pulling up to a regular sort of gas station to be refueled. They're usually taking on millions of gallons of fuel at a time. And although they actually end up taking up only a small amount of the global emissions, they can be running 24/7 for months or weeks weeks and months at a time. And so it's an incredibly challenging obstacle to make sure that these vessels are accounted for when we're looking at how we can decarbonize these systems. And this is also applicable to cruise vessels, hovercraft vessels, and offshore wind vessels that are going to also need a lot of these different fuel sources too. So just zooming back to something that I brought up before is, how do we produce these fuels? How do we produce these new fuels that need to be brought into being and be supplied to support these new vessels that are going to be operating with these fuels? There's a variety of different fuels, whether it's ammonia, methanol, LNG, as well as biofuels to be able to be dropped in. A number of these vessels are already being built. A lot of them are actually already calling the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey facilities, as well as the rest of the harbor. But they're out there, they are active. And right now, what we're finding is that some of these fuels are really hard for us to find here in our region. Part of it is incentives. Part of it is also what we can actually support in terms of the network. But it's also some of the infrastructure that hasn't been built out yet. So this is kind of where we are in the state of the Port Authority, the overall port infrastructure here on the East Coast. Right now, we don't necessarily have a lot of fuel producers. A lot of that investment is going into places like California, Texas, where either there's cheap raw energy and it can be mixed with non-green sources to create hybrid fuels or blue fuels. On the West Coast, there's carbon incentives and there's a number of stick and carrots out there to be able to bring and produce those fuels at the dock facilities. In terms of fuel storage, right now we're missing a lot of these links in terms of being able to store these fuels in appropriate ways, as well as the infrastructure to actually deliver it. And everything has to be delivered by actual bunker barges, large barges that have to be brought up to the ship side and then pumped in. And then lastly, a lot of the carriers and the ocean cruise ships are also finding that they can refuel in other locations and strategize right now. But in the near term future, they're expecting that this is going to be available for their use. So this all sounds doom and gloom, but the good thing I will say is that we've been working on this effort for the past year and a half. And in this past November, we brought together, along with the Maritime Association of Maritime Association of the Port of New York and New Jersey, we brought together all of the different players in this world, whether it was fuel providers, fuel storage folks, bunker and delivery vessels, ferry ocean carriers, as well as hovercraft vessels. And everybody agreed that this is a major problem. And they're all starting to strategize and work together to figure out how we can move this effort forward. But it takes a lot of coordination. It takes a lot of understanding. It takes a lot of investment. And right now we're in the process of trying to figure out which way the next steps need to evolve to. So to kind of summarize this, we're seeing overall in the freight energy sector, we're seeing increases in demand for electrical infrastructure and supply to support all of the electrification in the world, in our world. The investment in the production and delivery of these fuels is really meeting a lot of gaps in terms of the systems. But hopefully we're going to start seeing some new connections being made at this point. This is part of a larger supply chain that throughout the world that needs to be built up. And right now, locally, we're at a competitive disadvantage to creating these and to distribute these. And some of this is also meeting some backlash about what these sustainable fuels mean in terms of what community advocacy means against some of these. Some of them have a poor history from 50, 60 years ago, and some communities still have that long memory of some issues that they had back then. So we're going to need to find ways to find common ground on some of these energy issues. But there are great opportunities for development and growth. you know, a lot of the different companies involved are seeking new solutions and opportunities in this. There have been incentives, and so far it's worked out. A little bit messy, but they've been definitely progressing in some places, especially in the legislative front, and they've seen progress made when there are sticks and carrots assigned. And then on top of that, we're seeing more and more partnerships and pilots starting to emerge in these new technologies and these new systems, both with the private and public sectors working together on this. So there is hope in the future, but it is going to be a long road ahead of us. And with that, I have questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Stephan. That was really interesting. It's great to, you know, kind of when you're receiving your package from Amazon or something, you very often don't think about how it might have gotten to your door and get kind of pulling the curtain back and hearing about all the issues that are involved with that and all the people that have to work very hard to make that happen is great. So thank you. So I'm going to open it up to questions from the members. If you want to raise a hand or unmute your mic for either Stephan or Rochelle. I see Jerry's got one. Jerry.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So Rochelle, can you say a little bit more about the traffic management portion of the Cross Bronx effort at this point?
Sure. So I think an additional set of framing, I think I mentioned it in the presentation, making sure that the Cross Bronx Expressway is a reliable regional connector. It has, you know, become a goal. It's a community goal, and it has become a goal of the study as well. So future efforts will investigate how best to address this, to address how to manage congestion on the highway, and that I think could come in various different forms. I know the state is advancing some work around demand management, and we're looking to include additional strategies in the final report about how to address kind of how to include demand management strategies in future proposals. In the meantime, we're looking at a lot of freight management opportunities as well within the city DOT toolkit. So thinking about off-hour deliveries, which now can be funded through the congestion pricing restart. Thinking about clean truck programming, which also can be will be funded as a mitigation through the congestion pricing work. So we'll provide additional details in the final report about kind of all of these different items. Does that help?
It does. And one quick follow-up, if it makes sense to broaden that discussion to include folks from New Jersey, say, since it is a shared corridor, you know, that's something that we'd be happy to help facilitate through the map form. So please keep that in mind.
Thank you. That's very generous. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm going to throw out a question while we're waiting for others. And by the way, attendees, you can also put questions in the chat box, and if we have some time, we can get to them. But I was curious, Rochelle, I think you touched on this a little bit, what the effort was like to reach out to the very, very many different communities and folks along the corridor. I mean, it's certainly got to be quite a challenge to try to connect with them, to try to get them to take time out of their busy days, as I'm sure passionate as they are about the Cross Bronx being right in their backyard. So how was that effort? And were you able to come up with any kind of innovations that you want to share with us?
Yeah, thank you so much for framing that. You're exactly right. Participation in agency-led engagement can be really difficult to capture people's attention on an issue that's not, on an issue that's about visioning. So it's about imagining a future, and it's not about something that's moving forward right away. So that can be really difficult to get people, in the room at those times. That makes sense. So in addition to our agency-led engagement, which is often, on weekends or weekday nights, where we have a program in which we are able to pay community partners, which are community-based organizations. And this is an effort similar to our BQE work. So we're able to compensate community-based organizations to conduct their own outreach within their own communities and their own neighborhoods and their own audiences or supporter bases. So in that work, we have, our main engagement events. We usually do 3 events, one on a weeknight, one on a weekend in person, and then a virtual version on a weeknight. And then after that, we had a 6-week period in which our 10 community partners are conducting their own outreach in their own events or merging this with other events that they're participating in. So being able to utilize those relationships and really create partnerships and build like genuine relationships and meaningful relationships with community-based organizations has really helped us broaden the reach of this work.
Yeah, I think I might have seen one or more of those community-based organizations sponsor like a walk of the corridor or a portion of the corridor, getting people out there on like a Saturday afternoon or something. It was really great to see. So very cool. Any other members with questions for Rochelle or Stephan? Throw hands up. Let's see anything in the chat. Stephan, I wanted to ask you one since while we're waiting for anybody else to put questions forward. I was curious when you mentioned technologies that were maybe in the 50 to 60 year range. Were you talking about like nuclear, or what were you kind of talking about there with some other ways to produce energy that might have kind of fallen out of favor in the course of the last several decades? Where were you going with that? Or maybe I
Well,
misunderstood.
maybe a little bit of both. Maybe you're
Okay.
hand a little I misspoke. No, I think it's interesting because we're seeing nuclear be used on the data side and things like that, but we're also seeing companies experimenting with all sorts of different technologies, whether that's solar, wind, or even fuel cells, and hydrogen is even out there in terms of probably not in the near future for some of these freight modes, but in a little bit more distant future. Obviously, trucking is a little more of a nearer term effort on the hydrogen focus, but hydrogen production and utilization is also out there for sure. Just to give a stat, we've talked to folks from everywhere from Amazon and other warehousing entities, and they've seen some of these sort of electrification efforts, take their they've gone through and electrified the entire warehouse, about 100 of these warehouses, and they've seen a 5 to 10-fold increase in their energy demands because of it.
Wow.
So these aren't small numbers, and when you see some new warehousing come in, as opposed to having a small, what I would call local, almost residential kind of number in terms of 480 delivery service to their warehouse, we're now seeing full substations with 26 kV sort of delivery needed for energy. So we're seeing a lot of different changes in this rapidly evolving space.
Really cool to hear. I'm going to put a pitch in for a study that NIMTEC recently completed on clean freight corridors, where we did look at some of those issues with battery electric vehicles, but and diesel and clean diesel and other things, but also hydrogen was an exciting area. It's I think when I looked at the report, it was completed before I came to NIMTEC. California, I guess, was mostly in the lead there, and I think maybe Quebec. But so hopefully there will be some advances in hydrogen in the area too. But now I understand a little bit better what you were talking about. Thank you.
Yeah,
Do you have any other questions for Stephan or Rochelle? Jerry, did anything come in the chat, or Stephanie? I don't know who's actually keeping an eye on the chat.
I think Rick Dunn has his hand up.
Okay, great.
Rick?
I'm not sure if you can hear me now. I just wanted to thank Rochelle and Stephan for their presentations. My name is Rick Dunn. I'm the executive director of the Naugatuck Valley COG. I think the lack of questions is really a tribute to both of the presentations. They were comprehensive, interesting, and no matter what part of planning each of us may be involved in, I think pretty easily understandable. So I appreciated both of them, and I just wanted to thank them both for their presentations.
Great, thank you, Rick.
We do have a chat question that just came in.
Okay.
Is there to the question regarding energy sources? Is there any future potential for ammonia as a reliable energy source?
So yes, actually a number of different companies, and I'll speak, ammonia is more going to be a focus of maritime shipping fuel of the future, and actually of the present. Right now, there is maritime fueling for ammonia in both Rotterdam and in Singapore, and right now they have established what's called a green shipping corridor to be able to move ships between those two major hubs. Singapore is the biggest fueling port in the world, and Rotterdam is the biggest in Europe. So understand that they're looking at their future in terms of the need to be able to provide those two, that energy source, in addition to methanol and some of the LNG as future fuel sources.
There's a thank you in the chat as well for the kind words from Mr. Dunn. We also have a question that just came into the chat. It says, I also have a question about if energy production is being included in the development of energy intensive new supply chain facilities. Thinking about strategies like solar roofs on warehouses as a possible example.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's tricky because when the sun doesn't shine, you know, we're not getting production on from the solar, and when the wind doesn't blow, you don't get it from wind sources. But you know, there are a lot of incentives out there right now for many of these facilities to really leverage solar, because especially since they have such a large footprint, oftentimes they have an ideal location for solar, and they're using that, but they're only really being able to use these for peak shaving, or to be able to use this as recouping some of their expenses. A lot of them, even still with a massive solar array, is still needing to use energy from the grid as a overall net source that they have to bring in from.
Thank you. And that is the last chat question so far.
All right, I'm just going to throw what I hope was a real quick one out there for Stephan. You had mentioned something about being this area being at a competitive disadvantage, and I didn't, I guess, follow what you meant by that. I don't know if you could flesh that out a little bit more.
Yeah. So right now, there's no real incentives. First off, there's no REC incentives for renewable energy credits for any maritime fuels. Okay. And then in addition to that, right now, for instance, we've talked to folks from everybody from National Grid to dairy producers up in upstate New York who are using their what I would call the waste product from the dairy production, mostly manure, but other things, through biodigestion and gasification, using that to create renewable LNG or renewable natural gas. But all of that, all those RECs are going straight to California because that's where the market is for it, and there's no incentive to bring those molecules or to bring those incentives to a local facility down here instead. So we're trying really hard to understand what sort of incentives would kind of move the needle in terms of being able to keep some of those, what I'll call local energy sources local.
Sounds like there's still a bit of work to be done. I'm glad you're keeping an eye on that. Thank you, Stephan. I think we had another question or two in the chat, Stephanie.
Yep, some just came in. We have a question as how does the city DOT reimagine the Cross Bronx project relate to the New York State DOT 5 Bridges project?
That's a good question. So these two projects are definitely separate. So they're pursued by different sponsor agencies and on different timelines. And if and when work does continue on the Reimagine the Cross Bronx work in future, it will of course coordinate with the ongoing capital project that is the 5 Bridges work. But since the Reimagine the Cross Bronx work is a visioning study and is meant to really collect community vision around what they would like on the expressway, we're treating the two studies as separate and in very separate planning phases. Does that help? Michael, excuse me. Does that help, Michael?
There's a thanks in the chat. Yes, it was.
Like yes.
Then a follow-up from Rick Dunn, just that it was, again, it was an excellent presentation for you, Rochelle. They would be interested in having their community engagement team follow up with you on the strategy and methods. So perhaps you could provide email offline or via the chat just to facilitate that. And I believe that is the last chat message again so far.
Okay. All right, then I think we are at the point in our schedule where we're going to move on to our next section. So Rochelle and Stephan, thank you both for those really great presentations. So, and with this section, moving on to the regional event section of the agenda, I'm going to ask Dave Barron, my counterpart with the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, to introduce our next presenter. Dave?
All right, thanks, Adam. Our next presenter is Zoe Baldwin. Zoe's the Vice President of State Programs at RPA, the Regional Plan Association. She's been active in public policy at the state and federal levels for more than 20 years. Before joining RPA, she was Director of Government Affairs for the Utility and Transportation Contractors Association. And prior to that, she worked for U.S. Senator Cory Booker and U.S. Senator Frank Lautenberg. And she got her start back when I first met her, got her start in infrastructure policy as the New Jersey advocate for the Tri-State Transportation Campaign. And in addition to that, Zoe currently is a commissioner on the board of the South Jersey Transportation Authority, which oversees the Atlantic City Expressway and Airport. And she's a member of the board of directors of 3 other nonprofits here in New Jersey. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce Zoe, who's going to talk about the regional opportunities presented by the FIFA World Cup coming in 2026. Zoe. Are we good?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute in share screen mode.
Oh, okay.
Apologies, folks. So let me get this back up here. All right. My apologies. So yes, thanks so much for having me today, David. And again, my name is Zoe Baldwin. I'm the Vice President of State Programs for the Regional Plan Association. And we're the nation's oldest metropolitan research, planning, and advocacy organization. We work to improve the economic health, environmental resilience, and quality of life in the tri-state area. And so I've spent over 2 decades working in public policy at the federal and state levels to ensure that our built environment meets the needs of the residents and businesses that rely on it every day. But RPA has been at it quite a bit longer. And so we've spent basically the past century or so researching and analyzing the built environment and making recommendations for long-term projects and policies. And so we conduct research on transportation, land use, housing, good governance, and environment. And we advise cities, communities, and public agencies in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And so if we've learned one thing in that century or so, it's that local governments and county governments often need a little nudge in the right direction when it comes to planning for the future. And so today, I thought it might be good to explore some of the ways that our region can try to capitalize on the coming events and inure benefits for our communities that'll outlast just the tournament. And so, soccer is the most popular game in the world. The World Cup is one of the most prestigious and widely viewed sporting events in the world. And 2026 is going to be the biggest World Cup in history. We're going to have 48 teams from different nations coming to compete. And as we all know, MetLife Stadium in Rutherford, New Jersey was selected as the host to the games and the final set. And it gives us an incredible opportunity to showcase our region on a global stage. But amidst the excitement, we really need, and an acknowledgement that the games are essentially around the corner. We really want to take a look at what our region can do to, make sure the impact and the way that we're organizing ourselves is going to last a lot longer than, just the final whistle itself. And so, before I get into it, I wanted to make sure that everybody has like a good visual of the location. And so, as you can see here, it leaves much to be desired in terms of transportation, and it's actually an outlier compared to the host stadiums in many ways, including proximity to strong urban transit, and just its broader disconnection from the built environment in the rest of the region. And a fun fact, my coworker actually did the math, and it turns out that these parking lots here surrounding MetLife Stadium are actually the equivalent size of Greenwich Village, which means you can't walk to the nearest hotel. But also, that's not that surprising. Ooh, it's a little blurry, but we don't have that many accommodations in the immediate vicinity. We put together a quick heat map showing the locations of area hotels, just to give you also a sense of where people may be staying and coming from. But honestly, thinking through where people are going to be staying, the lack of accommodations, and then the high cost of staying in New York Central Business District means that most of the region is really going to see an upsurge in short-term rentals such as Airbnb and Vrbo. And that's going to further disperse attendees and make it harder to examine exactly where people are coming from. That said, that'll also be helpful to make sure that we have guests really exploring a little bit more of our region outside of just where the games are. And so just to give you a quick sense of the transportation options, the blue is the lines are the transit lines, and you can see it's a single track shuttle train from Secaucus, and there's really limited points of ingress and egress. And so we're a little concerned, that it would be very easy to overwhelm transit and road options. And again, the pedestrian access is almost non-existent. And so if you've ever been to an event at MetLife Stadium, you know that the hardest part honestly can be leaving, and not because you're sad that the event is over, but because of this inadequate transportation structures. And so we want to make sure that this signature memory of visitors coming to this event isn't waiting around in a parking lot, for hours at night to leave. And so on the transportation front, it's pretty clear that we're going to need to think creatively and be ready for unexpected congestion and also in unexpected areas. But now that I've painted this rosy picture for everyone, it's worth noting what most of us in public service know is that you kind of have to focus on the things that you can control. And so we have about a year and a half left before the first game of the tournament, and we're not building any new hotels. Transit is what it is. And it's even more critical to be planning efficient, thoughtful, and comprehensive solutions for kind of these known issues that we're going to see. And so while this, is a world event essentially just for 5 weeks, but it's also going to be a major happening for the people who live here, right? And so that kind of leaves us with two options. We can suffer the crowds, enjoy the excitement, and sweep up after the event is over, go back to business as usual. Or we can use these events to make the region a better, greener place to live, work, relax, and have fun. And so let's take a quick look at placemaking, right? So unlike, a Super Bowl or a Beyonce concert or other high-profile events at MetLife Stadium, the World Cup final will attract people beyond just those going to the event. Both ticketed and unticketed visitors are going to want to be part of the larger experience, and ancillary events are going to be taking place just across the region. And that's a really good thing, and we should be encouraging that. And so the question then is for this group, for MPOs thinking through ways to help communities capitalize on this unique opportunity, that's like a really great place to start. So for example, while the host committee, which is just New York and New Jersey, has done a pretty good job of including government entities. I think the MPOs have been at some of these meetings. They've been good at including like the large statewide chambers in some of this planning. There's been almost no engagement with local communities outside the exact host city. And with the SIDS and the BIDs that kind of are usually the ones planning and running all of these extra events, which for the record, events like this are part of that really big, what was it, $2 billion in broader economic activity expected to be generated from the games. And so it's critical that we have really successful downtowns that are able to create fun and exciting opportunities both for their residents and for people that are traveling around the region. A lot of the way that visitors experience the games is most people don't go to all of the games. We're certainly going to get people that will, with the finals especially, but there's going to be a lot of people that come to one game and then just spend the rest of their vacation time in the region. And so that's great. And that gives all of our communities opportunities to highlight themselves, because I think everyone on this call knows that our region has a few iconic images, but it's so much more than just New York City or the Meadowlands. You know, we want people to really get a chance to explore what we have going on here. And so an interesting role for MPOs initially could be partially in convening your board members and local bid and SID leadership to start to get an idea of what your constituent communities are thinking about. Some communities, for example, I think Hudson County is forming its own kind of local host committee. Other cities are doing just citywide things, like Newark is looking to have events downtown, both for residents and to draw new visitors to the city. And having these conversations now is really good because, as everyone on this call knows, it's a very short time. You blink and a year and a half is gone, and that's about what we have. And so if they haven't started planning, it might be good to give these communities a little bit of a nudge and ensure they're being proactive and starting to consider how to approach this massive opportunity, also with an eye towards, you know, being able to garner long-term improvements. And so there's a few suggestions I was thinking of, you know, just in terms of discrete actions that MPOs could take to kind of facilitate these types of conversations and the broader World Cup event. And so the first one, and I think this is an interesting one, you know, to the extent possible, given, again, like I have to put the short timeline caveat ahead of most of my comments, but consider prioritizing parklet planning and placemaking grants for communities that are hosting local events. In this way, we can use cities' interest in these games as a way to show them how an extra parklet or other features can really liven up their downtown, and then those items would then last beyond the games. There's a lot of creativity that can be done here, and it's also a really good action that could be coordinated with state departments and agencies, whether it's departments of transportation, economic development agencies. In New Jersey, DCA has some park and placemaking grants, but any of the departments and entities that have funds for these types of vibrant placemaking endeavors, you know, I think it would be really interesting to see a little bit of a coordinated effort to be able to quantify kind of at the end of the games beyond like the amorphous economic generator number, you know, in terms of like regional income, but really say like, we got X number of parklets in our downtowns. You know, we had X dollars of improvements made that were largely for these events, but now are benefiting these communities like kind of going forward. Street closures. This one, you know, DOT's got pretty good at this after, you know, the pandemic, and we're able to, you know, kind of facilitate this, but making sure that communities are thinking through this early and then also suggesting it, because I think, you know, street closures were, depending on the community, a hit or a miss. Most visitors love them, and people that are coming to the downtowns, they love eating outside. They love, you know, having pedestrian malls and things like this. But for example, nearby to me, I live in Monmouth County, New Jersey, Asbury Park, for example, immediately shut down. They shut down the pedestrian mall, and they said, oh, people don't like it. They want to park there, right? And so also thinking through any of these downtown events that might happen as ways to kind of have a broader conversation about placemaking and pedestrian malls and all of this. And then similarly, alfresco dining. Certain communities have trouble because it's kind of an unknown. And a lot of what people hear about, New York just went through this, is helping elected officials feel better about what they'd be getting into by perhaps helping with best practices or guidelines to help communities establish official outdoor dining programs to make sure that they're getting the access and setting up this great experience, but then also not having unintended consequences and otherwise upsetting people who really want to park in downtowns, because we know that's there. Shuttles. A lot of downtown events also benefit a lot from shuttles. And so MPOs, like kind of, I think what I'm getting here is MPOs are an interesting connective tissue within this, you know, being the liaison between the local communities and really understanding the kind of panoply of money and programs available and resources available to towns looking to capitalize on this. And so thinking through whether there's a role for TMAs or the shuttles that they run, you know, that can help facilitate some of these pedestrian friendly areas. And then finally, this might also be a good opportunity to just open up the conversation on bike shares, e-bikes, and scooters. We're going to have a ton of people in the region, and this could be a really good opportunity to help communities think about micro-mobility and active mobility, and really start looking into whether these are the types of programs that would benefit their residents, but also make their World Cup related events more enjoyable. And so these are all just some ideas. Every MPO operates a little bit differently, but it's good to kind of think about really how we can maximize on the event. And then I also wanted to share, you know, it's not just the Meadowlands, right? And so this is a little bit old, so don't take it as gospel, but this was a kind of basic overview map of where other things would be going on. So keep in mind that we're going to have training facilities. We're going to have the teams practicing at facilities around the region. And these are just more opportunities because people do like going to visit those training facilities. So they're going to be kind of around the area, and everyone's going to be soccer mad, right? And so just sharing through that. And so I'm going to keep it short. For those that are interested, the QR code here is to a webinar that we organized in June, which featured 5 leaders in global event planning and production who drew on their experience organizing previous World Cups and Olympic Games. And I'd love to open up the floor for discussion and welcome your thoughts on how we can leverage this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to showcase the diversity, culture, and energy that our region has to share with the world, right? And so I'm also happy to answer other questions. I just wasn't sure what this group wanted to really focus on the most and what would be the most useful, since I think some of the broader transportation conversations had already been happening. And so, yeah, I would love to open the floor for a conversation.
Thanks very much, Zoe. Really appreciate the presentation, a lot of good information, and I think a sort of different way of thinking about some of the smaller scale things related to this very large scale event. I should note that in the chat, the link has been shared to RPA's piece on their website about some of the experiences of other host cities and related issues there. And then I guess we'll open it up for any questions.
Hey Zoe, Jeff Perlman, NJTPA. And I was just thinking about some of the municipal activation and some of the abilities to take advantage of the games. If there are municipalities in New Jersey that want to do so, what do you and if there are counties who work with municipalities, should they reach out to, let's say, a downtown New Jersey? Like, is there a place where they could sort of get some high level discussion about what those opportunities may be? You know, I know we do work with municipalities, but you know, just in our region is 384 of them, and so you know, like it's hard to reach out to everybody to share that opportunity.
Yeah, so for those that aren't familiar, downtown New Jersey is the New Jersey Association for the Bids and SIDS. And so, you know, we don't have, I'm on the board of downtown New Jersey. And so we don't have a particular program. And so, but I think that starting to organize these, and I would love to hear, please, like, feel free to put me in touch. I can share my email address, you know, with any communities, and maybe there's some convening that we could do kind of jointly. And RPA is definitely happy to do that. That actually, it's really interesting thought, Jeff, now that I'm saying it out loud, like maybe this group, because it is the region that will be experiencing these games, and RPA could work together to kind of create like a forum to start this conversation, because you're right, there's not a real repository yet. And so Leslie Fordier has a comment about considering Times Square host a massive party. It would be a New Year's Eve type event in the middle of July. So I'm not exactly sure what they're planning outside of, New York City was going to do its own fan zone, which is the official kind of not game festivities for FIFA. But then they've decided to actually just keep it consolidated. And so the official fan zone is going to be at Liberty State Park in New Jersey, which is going to put an extra strain on our same transportation network. But I think it's a fantastic idea. I think that's a great suggestion for the host committee. And again, if folks on this call are interested in convening, please, here, I'll put my email in the chat, and those that have Jeff and I can work together on perhaps just getting a conversation going. Because that was part of my interest in having this today, was so that we would get some more popcorn, some ideas, get some, hear what people are thinking about. And I'd be curious if anyone has heard from their communities. And Laura Francis asked if there is a link to an organization that is coordinating tourism, and the answer is no. Each state is coordinating its own tourism, so that would be your state's existing tourism entity.
I see that Jerry Bogash from NIMTIC, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi Zoe. So great presentation, and really the start of larger conversations for sure. I think the possibility of using this organization as something of a sounding board or forum to continue this conversation makes a lot of sense. I also think that you're right that probably a lot of the nuts and bolts of the transportation planning have started, you know, between any number of operating agencies, but there are sort of what's the word, incidental parts of it, or amplifications that could be explored. You mentioned shuttles. And other types of transportation management, including demand management, and to some extent public marketing, that would make some sense to kind of layer around whatever the nuts and bolts planning is. So there are a number of opportunities, and particularly through this organization, I think, to do that. And we'll be in touch after the holidays, probably, to start to set that up.
No, that's great, and completely agree. Like, I think there's a lot of room for help, and so to the extent that we can facilitate, because I'll tell you the other thing that I'm concerned about, honestly, is wayfinding. That sometimes gets lost in the sauce, and this is a crowd that not everyone is going to be fluent in English, right? And we have a confusing system here. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be explored on how we can help out.
Is there any other questions? I think we've covered everything that was put in the chat to this point.
Yeah, all right. It looks like we have some interest. So I'm the guest, so I want to defer David to your folks. Let me know how RPA can be helpful, but we're very glad to kind of help with this conversation. I think there's a lot to be done. So I'll leave it to you guys to decide. I put my email in there, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that Jeff and I and Adam and Jerry and others from the other MPOs involved here can put our heads together and think about next step of reaching back out to you and keeping this conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zoe.
That was a great presentation. Thank you, Zoe. Yeah, and as a of course NIMTech employee, but a New Jersey resident, I'm very excited for the World Cup that's going to be coming, and the opportunities it's going to present for all of the opportunity, the placemaking and other improvements that we're hoping that we can see come out of that. So all right, let's move on, I guess, in our agenda. I think we have reached let me see where we are. Yes, we're on the we're going to hear from the registered speakers. I think we have a handful of registered speakers on a first come first served basis for the public comment portion of our agenda. We've reserved time in the agenda, and we ask registered speakers to please limit their statements to not more than 3 minutes. Jerry, are you oh no, Stephanie, I'm sorry, Stephanie, you're going to go through our registered speakers, please?
Actually, I think you were right the first time.
Ah, was I? Okay. Sorry, Stephanie.
I have the list here. So, yeah. And so, Fidel, as I call out these names, if you could unmute the people in the audience, that would be great. There are actually 2 people registered from the Office of Assembly Member Nikki Lucas. One is Caleb Buchanan, and the other is Nikki Lucas. So if either of those people are on, you're up first. Fidel, do you see them? And I don't see either one of them.
I'm not seeing them either.
Yeah.
Neither name in the list.
Okay, so we
Okay.
will move on from them. Next up is Andy Weiss. Andy Weiss.
Also don't see, unless he's using a pseudonym.
Right. Okay, well, moving right along.
Jerry, I'd just suggest that if those folks are on, maybe if they're logged in differently, they can just indicate in the chat who they are, and we can take care of them that way.
That would be great. Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
Michael Sutton is another name that's registered. Michael Sutton. No, don't see Michael. Okay, moving on from that, we have one more. Let's see if we're going to be 0 for 5. John McKiernan. John McKiernan.
Oh, well.
Okay.
John could have gotten 15 minutes there if he showed up. But...
Okay, well, that's it, Adam, and those are the people that have registered. So.
All right. Well, in that case, we're going to move forward with our agenda. So, our next agenda item is a series of updates on the activities of MAP Forum's 3 working groups. So, Jerry, don't go too far, because I'm going to call on Jerry Bogaz of the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council to report on the multi-state freight working group's activities. Jerry.
Yeah, you can hear me, right, Adam?
I can hear you.
Good. So I'm going to just scroll down on the agenda here
great.
to see where we are. So, multi-state freight working group. I'm actually pinch hitting at this point because the person who was organizing, facilitating, convening, chairing the group, Ann Strauss-Weeder from the staff of the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, has left the group due to retirement, and we wish her well on that. She did a tremendous job in bringing all kinds of topics to the group. But at this point, we are without a chair and working on that, and I'm just filling in at this point. In the past year, we've actually been focused on data in the working group. And as people know who are involved in any kind of freight planning, freight data can be very challenging for a number of reasons, including the fact that there are many private interests in the freight world, and much of the information that's important to freight planning is proprietary. Given that, this past year has been focused on freight data. In the spring, Anne was able to organize a very good workshop on the federal freight analysis framework that the Bureau of Transportation Statistics offers. And there is version 5 of that framework that has been issued within the past year. which is in the latest update of the database. The workshop was really focused on ways of accessing and using that data and different tools for making sense of all the various data that are in the freight analysis framework. That is a free source. It is not proprietary, obviously. There are other freight data available, freight databases, but they're often with charge. So the freight analysis framework is a very important aspect of freight data, and it's a very big resource to the freight planning world. So that was a spring workshop. That was a public workshop that was held. In the fall, the working group got together to talk about a regional freight data portal that's been in development for some time. Basically, we've been working with the New York State Department of Transportation and SUNY Albany on their efforts to bring freight data online in a portal arrangement and building that out to include regional data from this multi-state region, as well as the rest of New York State. That was a very fruitful discussion. The portal actually exists. There is a New York State Freight Atlas that is online in that portal. And we hope to expand beyond that in a number of ways to provide interesting information, not only for the public, but also for the members of the map forum and the member agencies of the MPOs that are using and need access to freight data. I do want to point out that this freight data portal was a recommendation, longstanding recommendation of NIMTIC's regional freight plan, and it was a focus of the discussions of the other MPOs in the multi-state freight working group. So those were the two activities, major activities that we undertook this year in the multi-state freight working group. And if there are any questions, happy to answer, but otherwise back to you, Adam.
There we go. That's a little bit better. Thank you, Jerry. I'm gonna ask for questions for Jerry, if anybody has any. That was a really great update on the improvements in data and that portal. I'm looking forward to exploring myself. Not hearing any questions. You'll still have another chance, though, folks, if you think of anything, or you can put something in the chat. Oh, this is actually for members, I think, the questions for the working group. So that would be anybody who wants to put a hand up. But let me get to our next update, which is going to be coming from Megan Sloan of the Connecticut Metropolitan Council of Governments to report on the Multi-State Resilience Working Group's activities. Megan?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So we've met a few times over the year, and there were a few focus areas. At our April meeting, we focused on the Long Island Sound Resilience Resource Hub and their 2024 plans. I think the bulk of the working group this year, though, focused on Federal Highways Vulnerability Assessment Scoring Tool. We had an hour-long presentation in August, and then they were nice enough to provide a half-day training in November. So just an overview of what this is. It's an Excel-based tool that walks a user through completing an indicator-based vulnerability assessment. So you look at exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. I tried it. It needs a lot of data, and I think the biggest challenge that we'll have is identifying data sources that are useful for what we want to measure and assess. I found the CMRA's Living Atlas to be very helpful. I focused on precipitation changes and temperature changes on a few bridges in the area. I reviewed my experience with the tool with Federal Highways and the consultant that they're using, and they were happy with the process. So I think as members try this tool, it will be interesting to get their ideas on data sources and their experience with the tool. Finally, the next steps is to collect feedback from other MPOs. Our next meeting is Thursday, December 12th at 10 a.m. We're going to be focusing on the Long Island Economic Flood Risk Study, and if time permits, get an idea of attendee experience with the VAST tool, and have a resilient holiday, everybody. Thank you. And I can take any questions.
Thank you, Megan. Any
and
questions?
I just want to thank Manesh Shah as well. He really led the, he's the co-chair of the working group, and he really led the exploration of the VAST tool.
Thank you, Manish. I think I saw a comment in the chat, perhaps. This is from Munish Patel here at NIMTech. FAF data are also available at, and there's a link. So thank you, Munish. All right, great. Thank you, Megan. Let's finish up. Finally, I will call on John Simpson of NIMTech to report on the Metropolitan Mobility Network's activities. John.
Thank you, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. The Metropolitan Mobility Network met twice this year. The first was in April. The topic was integrated corridor management with a primary focus on the I-495 ICM project across New York and New Jersey. So all the speakers in that meeting were local. However, at our most recent meeting, which was only this past Tuesday, we were primarily discussing employer-based commuting programs, and our keynote speakers, in fact, were from the Houston Galveston Area Council, who presented on their Commute Solutions program. Houston Galveston Area Council is the MPO for Harris County, Texas, and the Houston and Galveston metro areas. We also had presentations from NJTPA, the Easy Ride TMA, and from New York State DOT on the 511 New York program. So our next meeting will be in the spring. Date has not been set, topic has not been set, speakers have not been set. Daryl, we just had our previous one this past Tuesday. But keep an eye out as the meeting time draws closer, as we get closer to the spring, for more information about the next Metro Mobility Network meeting. And I'll also take any questions.
Great. Thank you, John. Any questions for John? Meeting earlier this week was really great. Folks from Houston were terrific, of course, and NGTPA and our own folks. It was a really good meeting. So thanks for putting that together. I think I'll make a last call for any general thoughts or questions. If anybody has anything they want to share from any of the members. I think maybe everybody's, well, up. Did somebody have something they want to say? Christine.
Nothing in the chat, at least. Oh,
Christine
there's
O'Neill, yep.
Yes, hi there. My name is Christine. I work for the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments, and I was asked to give a brief update on behalf of the Connecticut COGS related to the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. I'm happy to share that now. Connecticut's Council of Governments and the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection have shifted focus from the priority climate action plans, which were due in the spring. You may remember us giving some updates about that, to the comprehensive climate action plans. A quick note, these CCAPs are strictly planning documents and they don't have funds earmarked for implementation, unfortunately. On October 23rd, the COGS held a collective climate action forum where we had approximately 90 attendees from state agencies, small businesses, municipalities, and nonprofits. We had workshops that broke into groups for clean transportation, waste reduction, electrical grid, and energy efficiency in buildings. And we released 40 pages of notes with all the wonderful feedback we received that we look forward to incorporating into our CCAPs. So in the coming months, just stay tuned for even more community engagement as we begin to draft these plans. They're due in December of 2025. And I am going to put some links in the chat for the CPRG websites, and the notes that I mentioned. So thank you very much, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Christine. We will all stay tuned. And I know we've got some efforts going on in the New York, New Jersey area for the CCAP as well. Any questions for Christine? Any other contributions from any of the members?
There is a question in the chat about the presentations. Will they, with the contacts of the speakers, be shared for those who registered for the event?
They will be posted on the NIMTech website. There you go. And other MPO's websites. Thank you, Jerry. All right, last call. I'm going to thank Rochelle and Stephan and Zoe for the great presentations, and all the members for all your contributions, the working group chairs who spoke as well. Jerry, Megan, John, thank you. Christine, it was another great annual meeting. So thanks, everyone. Take care. Enjoy the holidays. And we hope to hear from you soon. And we will, of course, be following up on the FIFA World Cup. It sounds like that's a very exciting opportunity, and we will be talking more about that. So thanks again, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a great day and great weekend.
Thank you, Adam.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.